this video, I'm going to teach you how to make brushes. Just not your basic stamp type brushes, but just a little bit further. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new file, pretty large file, 3300 by 3300 at 72. Go ahead and click on create, and notice I have a lot of brushes in here. They all kind of do something different. And that's fun for me. Just note real quick that if you create a bunch of brushes and you imported a bunch of brushes or patterns or shapes, it will take longer for Photoshop to open. I'm just kind of pre-warning you on that one. So be very selective on your brushes. Now, typically, what I like to do is I will create brushes based off of the project that I'm working on. And then I'll save a group and save it in there. So that way, on a later date, I can use them. I can export them. I can share them with my friends. I can sell them. I can do whatever I want with them. But again, I'm creating brushes for certain purposes. So for example, if I wanted to create a brush that gives off some sort of like a spatter type texture, then I would have to create that from scratch. Now, normally what I would do is I would go searching for an image, like I'm going to do right now. So I have this loaded up right now. This is called Pexels, and you can kind of see it right there. Now this is for, this is like a site where I can download images for free. These are images that I can use for graphic designs, making bread, whatever I want to use it for, I'm able to use them. And so what I do here is I could just type in something like spatter. Now this doesn't mean I'm going to get the greatest things in the world. I mean, this search engine does a good job, but it may not always give me what I want. Like I can see there's spattering here. Just kind of depends on what they put in the background of these images. Ooh, that's good. So let's take a look at this one. This is kind of a weird example, but it looks like they have some paint spatter on these shoes here. So let me go ahead and let me make this just a little bit larger. There we go. And I'll just go ahead and flatten it. That way it's done. Now, this Pexels app, or this kind of plugin, you can look that up just where you go to pexels.com or unsplash.com. This is just Pexels because it's built in. That once I've installed this, it's built into the program, just makes things a lot easier instead of having to download an image and open it up in Photoshop. So I kind of like what's going on here as far as the spatter goes. Now I want to paint. So even though this is kind of cool, I'm thinking of repeatability as I'm painting with a brush. So, but I like all these random natural shapes that we have here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my lasso tool, and I'm just going to kind of select areas that I do like this. I know there's like hair and stuff like that. There might be areas that I don't want. So I can always hold that Option or Alt to kind of deselect it. Later I can paint over it. But for right now, that looks pretty good. Oops. I'm going to do that. There we go. So I'm going to, just with this selection right here, I can just go to select and inverse my selection to where everything else is selected. And I could just edit, fill with my background color or just with black. So for right now, that's kind of what I'm looking at. Now, typically when you have a brush, everything that is black is what's going to be painted. Everything that's white is going to be transparent. So I actually need to inverse this. So I'm going to hit Command-I or Control-I if you're on a PC. And you notice this is kind of what I want. So everything that's black will be part of the brush. But the problem I'm having right now is, again, this background is pure white, but yet this is kind of like an off-white. So I'm going to hit D for display options, or for display, D for default colors. And I'm going to create a gradient map. And here's the trick. So if I start bringing the white in closer, look what's happening. So I'm pulling that white in closer and it starts to disappear anything that's not pure white. So let me just pull that in a little bit. There we go. And that looks pretty good. So I can kind of flatten this now. And what I'm going to do, here's a neat trick, is I want to be able to crop all this nonsense out that I don't need. So I can actually trim this image. So if I go to edit and trim, it'll trim it based on the top left pixel, and it'll trim away the top, bottom, left, or right. And this is what I have left. So anything that didn't have a pixel that was painted, it trims it away. So now this can be my brush. As I'm looking at this, like, man, it looks pretty good. You know, I can always even go in with my stamp tool, and I could say, I'm going to sample some of that and put it down over here. And I'm just kind of filling in some of these like kind of gaps right there. But I don't want repeated areas because it looks like I have one right here, but I'll paint that out. The rest of it looks pretty good. So I know when I see these like hairs that are right there, that's going to give me an issue. So what I'm going to do actually is paint some of that out. So I'm actually going to sample some of this and paint out some of the hairs, because what'll happen is it'll look like repeated areas as I'm painting. So we'll kind of see, I'll leave some of it in so you can kind of see what I mean. And then I can always come back and make adjustments. I'm not going to paint out all of them, just some of them. And I may even edit some of it like that. But I think this one right here is so unique that I definitely will need to kind of paint it out. Otherwise it'll really come up. So I'm just looking for these really harsh scratches. And that's a pretty good spatter brush right there. I mean, even if I just use this as a stamp, I think that'll work out pretty good. So let me show you how to do this now. But if I go to edit, define brush preset, and you can see, look how this is, or how this looks. So I can see that's the pixels right there. And everything that's white, notice, is what's black here. And everything else is transparent. So I'm just going to call this spatter brush stamp. So this is telling itself. So spatter brush stamp, I'm going to hit OK. And now, I mean, it's already chosen. See that? So when I go to my brushes, I can see there it is, spatter brush stamp. So it'll be at the very, very bottom. And again, if you don't know where this is right here, these are my brushes. So you can go to window and brushes and you'll load that up. I just kind of have mine open all the time because I use them all. So for here, I'm going to go to new, and I'm just going to create a new document, really large again, the same one. I want to see how this stamp works. So I can actually make the brush a little bit bigger if I want to. Now I'm just going to click and paint. And you can see things get repeated as I paint with it. But if I just click once, then it acts as a stamp of just spatter and texture, which is good if that's what you want to use it for. And I can make it really large on this document. Just hit it once and it looks good. I can make it small, click, and then click, and then click. I can have it in several places. But as far as painting like this goes, that just doesn't look very good. So what I want to do is be able to just kind of paint and just have a nice, like, random amount of spatter kind of showing up. So to do that, I'm going to go to my brush settings. Now I'm working out this current brush now. So as I'm going through these, you can see those little check marks, but right now it says brush tip shape. This is what the front of the brush looks like. So, excuse me, I could space it out. This is kind of some of the common things. So I can space this out. So now when I click and drag versus what I had before, it was like this. Actually, it was spaced out like, I think, just a little bit more. So as I continue to space that out, now my spattering looks a bit more natural. Now, that actually doesn't look horrible right there, but you start to pick up on patterns. I can see some patterns right here, over and over again. So that's kind of what I want to avoid. But so far, that's pretty good. I can squish the brush or turn it if I need to. Let me go back to 0 where it was. I could adjust the roundness of it. I think I could squish it in like this if I wanted to. And then I can turn it if I wanted to like this. So that's really good if you're doing like calligraphy. But I'm going to, for my purposes of this brush, I'm going to leave it back at 0 and 100. All right, but I like that spacing. I think that's pretty good spacing as far as the size of the brush. And I can just go work my way down. So now I have shape dynamics. So right now I'm using my Wacom pad so I can utilize my pen pressure. So what this means is right now it says, I'll go to size jitter in a second, but if I barely press on my Wacom pad, you notice that it's very small. And as I press harder, it gets a little bit bigger. Let me try this again. So I'm barely pressing, and then I press harder, and the brush size gets bigger. So that's what this is. So if I say size jitter, you can kind of see an example of what's happening here is that now it's varying the size. So whereas some will be much larger than others, it's just kind of like a random thing. And that's what we want, more random. Now I can have a minimum diameter, but I'm leaving it at 0. We have angle jitter. So as I move this, if you see this in this bar right here, you notice things are starting to rotate. So this is kind of nice because this will help with that randomness. Because now it's rotating every time the stamp happens as I'm pressing the brush. it's rotating a little bit. And I could base that off of, and I'm just undoing every time. So I can base that off pin press. So if I really press hard, it starts to rotate more. So that's something I would do like. Now, if you're doing this with just a mouse, you won't have that pin pressure available. So you'll have to adjust the jitter here and the size jitter here versus using, and then you just want to have that control of the pin pressure. There's also roundness jitter. So it'll kind of adjust the roundness of the brush. And you can also flip it too. So I can flip X and Y and really get a lot of random. And so far, that's looking really good. So I could take that brush and just build up some quick texture if I wanted to, just like that. All based off of a weird picture of a shoe. So I can continue, there's scattering. So I can scatter, which means it breaks it apart even more. So as I look, now when I draw, it kind of goes all over the place because my scatter is very high. So I can beef that down. There we go. That was a little too much for me. There. That's really kind of random. That's what I'm looking for in a spatter brush. Now count, if I really increase that, it's got, like right now it says 4. So that means it'll duplicate itself 4 times or 5 times. So that's going to make my brush really thick now. If that's what I was wanting to do. I'm going to up that to 10. And so maybe I don't want it to be that much. In fact, I was kind of liking it the very beginning like that. And then count jitter, that just means sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little. So that's looking pretty good. You know, so I'm just trying something out. If it works great, then I keep it. If it doesn't, then I adjust it. And you can base off of course, this information right there. Then we have, texture, and I can add a texture to this based off of this information. If I wanted to, I really don't want texture on this brush. Color dynamics, that's if I was painting with a color. Then that means I can actually base this off of, let me just choose red and green, very opposites here. You can see foreground and background jitter. So that means some cases there'll be a mixture of a red and a mixture of green. And look at all that color information we're getting there. And the brush is doing that for me. So if it's just black and white, I'll get variances of black and white. So that also is something that you can add to it. That's hue and saturation jitter and brightness. And I'm just going to go down a little bit more. We see things like build up or wet edges. That's maybe not what we need for this one, but that'd be like if I was trying to simulate watercolors or something like that. Smoothing, and then of course if I had a texture, I can protect it, make sure it always stays the same. But for right now, I really like that texture brush, and I can use that in a lot of my paintings to add just quick, like dirty texture to something. So now that I'm done, you'll notice that if I click on the spatter brush stamp, it will reset everything that I just did here. Everything I did here is temporary. So I have to make a new brush with these settings. So that's right down here at the bottom. So if I hit that plus button, now I can create this. I'll just call it a spatter. I don't need to call it a brush. It's already a brush. But look, it says 2,161. So let me cancel that for a moment. If I want my brush to be a very specific size, I can always adjust it. So let me go in here, and under my brush size, I can just type in 2,000 pixels, and that's the brush size right there. When I click on create new brush, you can see that 2,000 is right there. Let me delete that. Now again, if I want to include the color of whatever, like let's say I was making bushes and it was green, then I would say include color, whatever I chose here. I'm not doing that. I'm letting the user figure that out. And so let me click OK. And there we go. So now when I click back on my brushes, I see there's spatter, and then there's spatter brush stamp. So you can see, remember that one compared to what we have here. And now it's a bit more, has a bit more texture to it, and I can add all that kind of fun stuff to it. And you can see I've done other things like this, random noise, that were kind of what I did right here. And that, just like this sand one right there, it all derived from that one picture, but manipulating it, now I have something that looks like this. Okay, so there's lots of things you can do with brushes to create some really cool effects. You just kind of have to play around. And so these, I'm gonna do one more just kind of really quick. You notice I had an image there a second ago of space. So let's say I want to make a brush that just kind of painted stars. So first thing is, let me just gather some stars. There you go. I guess I could just use this image, right? But let's see, what if I wanted to just paint my own all the time? So let me go in here. We just hit L, and I kind of like this setup right here. If that's what I like. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'm going to go flatten this. And again, let me zoom in just to make sure I like this setup. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So I like these. You know, it's from the image, there's lots of little intricacies in there that maybe I wouldn't have thought about when I originally tried to paint something like this. So let's see, I'm just trying to gather a bit more. There we go. So I like that. So let me go ahead and select inverse. I'm just going to paint the background with black. I'll invert everything so that way I could just see this information. And I only want black and white because that's all it paints over anyway. So let's see. So let me create a gradient map. I'm going to bring in that white to hide that extra kind of stuff that's there. There's still a lot going on, just not as much. I think I took it over too far. And there. That's pretty good. So I'll go to flatten, and I'll go ahead and trim the image. So it just leaves me with this. And that's going to be my brush right there. So edit, define brush preset, call this stars stamp. Again, I'm naming it this because I want to make sure that I know what the difference is between the stamp and anything else. But so far, that's what I have as far as stars go right there. That's not too bad, but I know that I could do better. So let's see. Let me go to my brush presets. And in fact, I'm going to go inverse here. Let me just paint so that way I can see this easier. There we go. And I'm going to paint with white so that way I can see that on screen. So we go to my brush presets. And first, just start from the top. Let me space this out. No pun intended. And I mean, just by doing this, I mean, I get a nice set of stars. That's not bad. So let's go ahead. Let's do some size jitters. That way, as I press with the pen, it could be really small, and then as I press harder, it gets bigger. So that kind of that adds a bit more control to the brush now. Let me change the angle a little bit so that way it's more various, or a little not various. That way it's a little bit variety is probably the word I'm looking for. Roundness, jitter. I'm going to flip X and Y. You notice I'm kind of doing the same thing. Do some scattering. Let me up the count a little bit because I want a lot of stars. Ooh, that scatters a little crazy. Man, look at that. So really quickly, I'm able to paint in some pretty good stars. I do want some color dynamics on there, especially if you're doing black and white. And I'm going to keep it like that, except I'm going to space this out just a bit more. And I want that size jitter to be down just a little bit. Look at that. That works really well. So now I'm going to go ahead and save this as stars. And this is an active brush that I can play with. So now I can kind of create this in a new environment. So I'm just going to do something real quick. Let's do a quick design just to see how this works. I'm just going to make a gradient from the bottom up. There you go. And I'm going to paint some stars in. We do some large ones to start off. I'll do some small ones that kind of, I'm fairly pressing with my mouse. For my mouse, I don't like that, with my pen. I'm just clicking and dabbing, and now all of a sudden I have something pretty cool that maybe I wouldn't have been able to have before. And I can always play with opacity so that way it's not as strong, to kind of give some distance. But look at that. So real quick, I have a brush based off of an image called stars that I wouldn't have had before. And so very quickly, based off images, I have stars and stamp, spatter and stamp. So very easily. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a try. You'll like the fact that you can make your own brushes out of images. So stamps are great, but also as you can manipulate them and paint over other items, it gives you a lot more control and flexibility. So give it a try. See how it works.